So that leads me to another little story, which is the story from which we get the word mentor, and hence the verb mentoring, is the Odyssey. The story of Ulysses, or Odysseus is the Greek name, and it's often referred to as the root story of the Western world, because Odysseus goes off to the Trojan War, and then he can't make it back home to the island of Ithaca, and he spends 10 years wandering, lost, and going through all kinds of adventures, and that caused, of course, James Joyce to write his book, Ulysses, about how Western people, modern people, have been lost ever since. And so it's considered to be the root mythic story behind Western history and experience. Well, the Odyssey doesn't begin with Odysseus. It begins with the son of Odysseus, who's called Telemachus. Odysseus is the king of the realm of Ithaca, an island kingdom, and Telemachus is the son, or the prince, the young prince of the realm. And when his father is gone and doesn't come back, there's no one to rule the realm, and so marauders take over. You know, kind of like, say, the right wing of the Republican Party. They take over, just kidding. They take over. No, I'm not. They come. And what they're doing is draining the realm of all of its value, they're using up all the wealth of the realm because they don't know what a realm is like and what you're supposed to do. And so Telemachus, who has this nobility in him, knows he's like 15. He knows he can't fight all of them, and he longs for his father to come back, his father as king, to put things back in order. And he's in this kind of crushed lament about it, and he's wandering the shore of the island and weeping and storming inside himself about the collapse of the realm, when along comes an old sailor named Mentor. And Mentor comes upon the young person in his trouble, in his turmoil, and says, what's going on? And Telemachus pours out his lament. The whole realm is collapsing. There's nothing good happening anymore. There won't be any place for me or anybody else, and all this kind of thing. And the story says that at that point, the goddess Athena enters Mentor and causes him to speak in a certain way. And he tells Telemachus, you have to go in to the Congress, you know, their collective meeting, and you have to go in and speak what's on your heart and speak out the truth that's inside you. You have to do that. That's the only thing that will save you from this turmoil you're in. And Telemachus actually does. He goes in and he speaks everything out, and he speaks with great nobility, and he's inspired. It says Athena goes into him too, and he's inspired. And they listen to him, and they even say at the end, that was a great speech, and you made a lot of good points, and now get out of here because we're going to ruin the realm anyway. You know, that's an important point. In other words, we're not working with young people because they're going to go and change the world right now. No, it's about their change and what happens inside them. Because after that, Telemachus leaves the realm and begins his initiatory journey out across the seas. And Mentor goes with him. Now, the point where mentoring begins in the Western world is the point when Mentor speaks to Telemachus, and the story says at that point, Athena comes into Mentor. A couple of things are happening. Athena is the goddess of wisdom. Mentor, the name Mentor, comes from an older goddess named Mentes, who is like the oldest goddess of wisdom. So his name means he comes from the line of the wisdom people, and then the goddess of wisdom enters him. So what I find in that is this really, to me, wonderful idea that if a person is genuinely mentoring, Athena will enter them. That is to say, wisdom will come into them. So one reason to be mentoring is you can have an occasional wise moment, you know? You know what I'm saying? In a world where that is rare, if you are really engaged in it, you will find yourself saying things that are wise to young people that on another day wouldn't occur to you. I'm saying that mentoring, when done authentically, has inspiration in it for the mentor. Another thing I'm saying is if you are engaged in mentoring with a young person who's in their turmoil, like young Telemachus, imagine he's the young prince, he's the young noble soul. Same thing could be for a princess, or, you know, the young queens I was calling those girls. When they pour out what the trouble is, that generates an intelligence inside us that we might not have on other occasions. That is to say, their turmoil makes us smarter. And in a situation like that, you trust yourself. When I first started working with young people, I was quite scared of everything, and I didn't want to hurt anybody, and I didn't know what the rules were. You know, I was afraid I was breaking some kind of rules all the time. And so some situation would come up, and I wouldn't be sure what to do. Like, for several years, I was going around giving talks, and at the end of it, young people would inevitably come up at the end. This went on for 2 years, and they would wait till everybody else were gone, and then usually one would be there at the end, sometimes a couple, and they would come up and say, like, you mentioned death quite a bit, because I always talk about death, and I said, yeah, and they said, well, like, what do you think about suicide? Now, this is one of those opportunities, In other words, they're not randomly raising the issue. They didn't just read Jean Paul Sartre. Some of them did. But mostly what they're doing is thinking about suicide. So you have to do something, And so it's a mentoring moment, I call it. I might be in that town for just that night and I'm gone the next day, but there's the mentoring moment. So I would say something like, have you tried it? Well, no. I said, are you thinking about it? Well, yeah. I said, have you made a plan yet? What do you mean? I said, have you thought about how you would kill yourself? Go right into it. That's what I learned. And all of a sudden they'll tell you exactly what's up. And the fact that they're asking means they don't want to die. Otherwise, why would they ask? If they wanted to die, they'd be doing it. So I just act on that premise, and I would say to them, look, if you wanted to die, you would have done it. You actually don't want to die, but I'll tell you what, something in you has to die, and that's why you're thinking of suicide. And they said, what do you mean? I said, to become bigger, something has to die, and you have to let it die in order to grow into the next stage of your life, and you're confusing that something with yourself. And then I look them right in the eye and said, do you get me? And usually they would go, yeah. I said, do you know what it is that's trying to die? And then help them figure it out. Am I making sense here? So what I found was, from the story I found it, and also from just paying attention to myself, that you have to trust your instinct in those situations. That's why someone asked you. In other words, the question isn't, oh, wow, am I allowed to do this? Am I smart enough? Don't worry about it. Athena will show up if you allow it. And the reason they're asking is because they picked you. Now, this is an important rule. Not a rule. It's a notion inside mentoring. Often, mentoring programs are set up because they're a program in such a way that mentors are assigned to mentees. If at all possible, I've found it works better if the mentee picks the mentor, because they will act on their instinct and they will instinctively pick a person who can give them what they need. Does that make sense? It's a harder thing to do if you're working with the program situation, but it works like a charm. I remember we were in a library inside a high school in Ohio, and we had been working for a couple of days on racial issues. There was a lot of fighting going on in the high school, and we had a number of the kids in the library that were in the most trouble, and they were mostly white and black. And then we had some people from the community that wanted to volunteer to mentor, and they were white and black also, and they were all kinds of ages. And the one thing I asked everybody to agree on was that the young people would pick their mentors. And the things that happened were striking. Like the biggest, baddest dude, African-American kid, that was in so much trouble and intimidating everybody, to everybody's utter surprise, picks a little old retired white-haired librarian. And everybody went, wow, this won't work. What happened is his whole behavior turned around. Whereas he was failing his classes, he started passing his classes. And what turned out to be the reason was he had never learned how to read and write properly. And he picked the person in the room who had the patience and knowledge to help him through that. And she actually taught him how to read and write and taught him very well. They became very close to each other and began to demonstrate to everybody how smart young people are. He didn't know her background. He just picked her out. She was the one. So this is like an idea about mentoring. Whenever possible, let the young people pick, because the genius inside the young person will see the genius inside the older person and pick the right genius. Does that make sense? These are the things I've learned to trust about it. So in a situation, to go back to the Odyssey, where someone is asking you something and you're in the role of mentor, I'd say take the chance and give something. Usually it's 50-50. You're 50-50, you're going to be wrong or right. So what the hell? You take a shot at it. You don't have to be utterly confident. But if a young person has picked you out to ask you something, that means they already have seen something in you. They may not understand it, but it's there. So mentor goes back to the ancient idea of mentes, which is feminine wisdom. I guess I want to underline that, because feminine wisdom, which is related to the goddess Sophia, from which we get philosophy or philosophia, which means love of knowledge, is embodied wisdom. Wisdom in the modern Western world has come to be an abstract thing. And the ancient idea, and I think the more vital idea, is embodied wisdom. So when it says that the goddess Athena comes into mentor, it means that wisdom gets embodied through him. And that changes his speech. And so there's another reason to mentor, just to have these occasions where we become wiser than we would be otherwise. And another piece of information in there is not that a person has to become super knowledgeable. They have to be open to the knowledge wanting to be there at that time. Now, an exercise you can do with it is to go back in your own life and remember times when someone gave you a piece of knowledge or a piece of attention or a confirmation that you really needed. I call them mentoring moments. In the modern world, it's rare, seems to be rare, to have an ongoing, enduring mentoring relationship one-on-one for a long time. At least I find that mostly rare, especially amongst at-risk kids. They're here and then they're gone. We're there and then we're gone. And so I look for mentoring moments, because in a moment of mentoring, a tremendous amount of stuff can happen all at once. Look at Telemachus. He goes from lamenting and weeping and falling into depressions and worse to going in and speaking his mind. Once he speaks his mind and he hears his own voice, and even his enemies have to say, man, you're a good speaker. We're not going to listen to you really, but you're good at it. Then he has enough to go out into the world and to try his own journey, getting into his own ship instead of waiting for his father to come back and settle everything. So there's a wisdom waiting to happen in each mentoring moment. I'm trying to bring this to the level of what I call living philosophy, that the exchange between the mentor and the student, or the mentor and whoever the other person is a moment of wisdom trying to happen that enriches both of them, Because mentor, the old sailor, gets to use his knowledge, which otherwise would be wasted, like the people in the old age home. On the other hand, the young prince gets to learn about himself in the world. Mentoring is about helping to awaken and confirm the gifts in young people, and about connecting them to the world. When mentor tells Telemachus to go in and talk to the council, he's telling them that you have a role in this world, and you need to begin that role now. That's helping him initiate him into his life. And so that gives a hint that mentors have to do with the deep intelligence in the people they're mentoring, and also in connecting them to the world. And that's why I often say mentors are bridges between things. Wisdom, since it's mentioned there, has two roots. One root means guidance, the capacity to guide, and the other root means lyric. So we're back to the idea of drumming and singing. Wisdom has a lyric in it. It has a song in it. That's what's gone wrong in the Western idea. Only the kind of knowledge side, and that's been abstracted too. And it's lost a sense of rhythm and song. So that when a person is working wisely, they will have a song and a rhythm in them, as well as the sense of guidance and knowledge. You get what I'm saying? It's back to the embodied wisdom, embodied knowledge, rather than abstract. Young people are like in their bodies and trying to figure out what to do with their bodies, and so it helps if the mentors are in their bodies too. It's easier to run into each other.